Corinne Le Carre there, speaking to our science reporter Rebecca Morell. Well, with me now is Tom Burke, a visiting professor at both Imperial and University Colleges, and an environmental policy advisor to Rio Tinto, the metals and mining multinational, or behemoth, isn't it? How is multinational business reacting to this? I mean, the science would appear to be incontrovertible, despite the sceptics.
Well, I think they're taking it very seriously. Now, that doesn't mean they know what to do, and you've got to divide the business community really into two parts. There are the climate makers, that's the fossil fuel industries and their customers, and then there are the climate takers, which is the rest of the business community who have to live with whatever climate we end up with. And the climate takers are getting increasingly worried. About 100 ski resorts wrote a letter to President Obama before he made a speech earlier in the year saying, please do some more or we won't have a business. We've just seen PricewaterhouseCoopers issue a report on the IPCC to all their clients saying, look, if we go to 2 degrees, that might be manageable. But if we go to 3 to 4 degrees, then really you're talking about whether businesses can exist or not. So I think they're starting to take it very seriously.
But when you're looking at, say, big businesses like Rio Tinto and other mining organisations all around the world, how big a feature is it in their business development and strategy to try and make things as green as possible?
I think nothing like as big as it should be, and that's because the politicians are failing. I think after Copenhagen, most of the big businesses came to the conclusion that the politicians were not going to act decisively. They were right about that, and therefore they sort of went ahead on a sort of business as usual course because they've got lots of other stakeholders. They need politicians to act above all, and they're not getting that yet.
Everyone talks about the threat from developing nations and the fact that they want to obviously to get to the same standard of living as the developed world as well. But is it so paradoxically easier for a developing nation building new power stations and things like that to do it in a much greener way because the infrastructure isn't already in place with all the old technology?
I think there's a real risk that we will discover that we are committed in Britain, for instance, to the past and an old form of generating our electricity, and we're looking at a whole group of countries doing exactly what they did on telecoms and simply leapfrogging into wind and photovoltaics, especially photovoltaics, because the sort of price of those is falling through the floor.
You talk about the weakness of politicians in various countries where these multinationals are operating. So if the politicians won't act, are you saying that big business will just carry on regardless?
I think that no, I don't think they will, because actually sooner than most people think, they're going to find it really changing their sense of what the risk for their investments are. I think the two groups of people that really need to get their act together to put pressure on governments to do more are the big businesses, as we've said, but also the cities, who are incredibly vulnerable to a changing climate, and we saw that with Sandy last year.
And are some big businesses vulnerable potentially further down the line to litigation by some countries? For example, the Maldives, you know, the worst predictions are that the Maldives will be underwater in a matter of 100 years.
No, well, maybe even sooner than that, but I think there is going to be a real issue, which I think we're going to find very difficult to deal with, about who is liable and who should pay for the damage that's already being done. When we have extreme floods in this country, and we've had several in the last few years, the small businesses, the chip shops, the garages, the pubs, when they get flooded, about 40% of those small businesses don't recover. I think we're going to see a lot more agitation for responsibility for that sort of damage